Welcome to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals here, as always, your host of the show, as we're steadily moving along to the finish line of the 2021 tennis season. This week's guest on the show is the Senior Editorial Manager for Tennis.com, where you can find a lot of his great work there, including a cover story on a man playing today, Frances Tiafoe. Welcome to the show, Ed McGrogan. Ed, first time chatting on this platform, so glad to have you.
Yeah, you're making a distinction there. It's been a while since you and I have caught up, but happy to be on this specific platform and happy to talk Frances as well.
Yeah, the last time we chatted was right before the 2020 U.S. Open. It was tennis literally in a bubble. You were on the grounds talking about how eerie and spooky it seemed. And, to go from that U.S. Open to this one with the crowd back and everything starting to open up, it was almost like a footnote, like an ending to that insane period that we're going to mark throughout history. And I have to ask you, someone that's been a journalist in this field for so long, what has that process been like of almost getting through, not completely unscathed, but getting through covering tennis in a pandemic, in a bubble, to now see things start to get back to normal?
Yeah, you realize what you have, you realize what the sport is really about, because these are the many things you take for granted until they're taken away. So in terms of tennis specifically, we're only now getting to the point where you can see something on the horizon of a normal calendar again. And even, 2022 probably still isn't going to be completely back at that point, but I'm so glad we're getting closer to it. And, it made, I think I mentioned this maybe even the last time we talked. It certainly makes you a little bit more creative, kind of finding things that you never really would talk about. And quite honestly, for a sport that can sometimes be as repetitive as tennis can be, that's not necessarily a bad thing, to find some new storylines and new ways to talk about things. So an experience I never want to go through again, but I think we did okay, all things considered.
That 2021 U.S. Open a couple months ago, you have the fans back and you just realize what it almost felt like a different sport, like that the players were playing, because they obviously feed off of it. And, it's cliche, but they made a difference in a lot of those matches, especially for those Americans, one who we're going to talk about in a second for sure.
Yeah, it was, a lot of sporting events, truth be told, from a fan perspective, it seems to me, and this goes beyond tennis, that you're seeing sporting events where you're either getting hesitancy for crowds to come back, which I understand, or you're still not back in that peak of, fan mode, if you will. But the U.S. Open, I thought was, it was kind of the explosion that I thought impressed across all sports. And not all tennis tournaments to this point have had that same buzz back. Indian Wells didn't have that same attendance level, that same sort of vigor to it. But the U.S. Open, in spite of some pretty big name, withdrawals too, that really impressed. I think everybody took that away from the event. So I thought tennis did very well in that. And, the most important thing, thankfully, is that it doesn't appear that, these big outdoor events with huge capacities have had any big impact on cases and such. So you don't have to feel bad about it either, which I think was justifiable to think so at the time.
It was a great opportunity for the players that were committed to playing, that didn't have to deal with injuries like some of the big names who, for various reasons, weren't at the U.S. Open. It was the land of opportunity for a lot of players, one of which is Frances Tiafoe, the story on tennis.com, a great article that I encourage everybody out there to read. Frances Tiafoe is a young American player, and as we recorded, just went final. He did beat Tsitsipas again, so it'll tie into what we're talking about here. But young American,
it doesn't hurt. Yeah.
It does not hurt. The young American player who has a lot to like about his game. The fact that he plays the way he plays is one thing, but the crux of this story is that this is a player who has a lot of confidence and lights up a room, as our colleague Nick Monroe said. He is somebody that fully has that belief that on any given day he can beat any player in the world. As you started to dive into the story of Frances Tiafoe, beyond just the exciting match play, was there anything about his story, his belief system, that surprised you or intrigued you as you peeled back some layers?
I mean, I think he's an interesting case for a lot of reasons. The biggest is kind of to what you're saying is I think you can actually sort of throw the rankings out with Frances in a way. Earlier in this issue of the magazine, we actually looked at the totality of American men and women and how there's a great quantity of strong players, but not exactly that quality that you're going to compare to the eras of the 90s, even Andy Roddick, times like that, Serena Venus, et cetera. But something with Frances that I've noticed, and I really noticed at the US Open, which was why I wanted to focus on him, was it doesn't really matter what this guy is ranked. He's actually never been, an all told, that high of a ranking. Even right now, he's just hovering on the top 50, but you would never get that impression when you watch him play based on A, the crowd reaction, B, how his opponents play him. I mean, they respect him like he is a top 10 player. I feel like they know that, to your, to what you just said, kind of at any point, this guy can play exactly like a top 10 player. And what I discovered writing the story was, I think those assertions were backed up by the people who know him best. He played doubles this year with 3 different partners. Kyrgios is one, the other 2, Nick Monroe and Rajiv Ram. And I talked to the first 2, and they effectively said that this is a really special player that, I think some people can get the wrong impression of, perhaps. Certainly he has his showmanship, but I think the big difference is this guy backs it up, and he has he's still headstrong despite some of the bravado you may see.
Yeah.
So I think overall for Frances, it was backing up sort of the impressions that I got on him, and we can get into those later, but a very special player who I think is a really good buy low candidate right now, as I put it.
Yeah. And just to kind of go off what you said, diving into American tennis, it's that Riley Opelka quote where he acknowledged it. Like, we have a lot of players ranked in the top 100, but we don't have those quote unquote world beaters. And for whatever reason, we can get into the backstory of why that may or may not be the case. But the point being, Frances Tiafoe has, it was funny. I got to speak with him a couple months, probably 6 or 7 months ago. And the 2 things that struck me were, he is a down to earth guy. I mean, it's a really personable guy who is engaging in a conversation, but you touched on it. He's authentic. You see him on the court, and it's not bragging. He has that belief system. He's not somebody that likes to rub it in, so to speak, but he really believes that he can be the best in the world. And that's something that I think we take for granted from some of the people that have gotten to that level, to have that belief system, to know that, everybody who says they can beat the top players, Ed, but to go out there and actually back it up, as you say, it's a pretty tough feat and it's a pretty tall task. And Rajiv Ram was the one in your piece who said, I was struck by how hard the kid works, how he's like a student to some of these veterans who have been around for such a long time.
Yeah, Rajiv, even though they only played 2 matches at the Olympics together, they lost their second rounder. But he was so impressed by the questions that Frances was asking him during game planning for their matches. He put it something along the lines of, when it's time to work, this guy works like no other. And I think for Frances, I think players appreciate that. I think what you just said about authenticity, the fans, I think that's a big reason why he is so likable. There's a difference, I think, between cockiness and confidence that he walks very well. He certainly believes in himself, but I think when Frances takes, I talk about a few of the big wins he has, but when he does take losses, he really feels that too. He looks inward. I think he's looked to figure out, the right way to go forward from something, an obstacle that he didn't overcome. He's got a great coaching hire in Wayne Ferrer. He is definitely getting the most out of whatever he's able to bring. And I think he will over the course of his career because of that. And I think, there are a lot of players, American players otherwise, that they can surge temporarily and might not have that longevity. I think Frances is very much in it for the long game.
Yeah.
And I think his love of the sport is one reason. I think he just, he's willing to put in the work, and we're seeing that now. We just saw it a few minutes ago.
The growth in his game too, it could be mentally, it could be on the court as well. He loses that near 4-hour match to Andy Murray last week. And it took a lot out of him. It took a lot out of both men, obviously, but for him to bounce back, treat this week like a brand new week, turn the page, not something that a lot of young players can easily do. I find it also fascinating too, just looking back at the tennis history book, that we're in this era where players are reaching their peak later in their adult life and their pro career. That maybe 30, 40 years ago, you'd say, well, Tiafoe's been around forever. It's not happening. Is it ever going to happen? But we're looking at it now like this is, as you say, at the long haul. He's put in a lot of years to his craft, and I think we're just starting to see him scratch the surface to being that elite, consistent player.
I think that, this group of Americans is actually benefiting from the fact that we have not had that transcendent U.S. player on the men's or women's side in a while. Now, Corey Goff certainly could become that player, but I think even her, to a degree, is going to get some more slack cut based on, it's been a long time since we've had the Pete Samprases, the Roddick's, the Agassi's, the Serena Venus. So I think there's a bit more understanding of, where the U.S.'s place in the tennis world is. I mean, the world has certainly produced incredible players that we, quote unquote, we have to compete with. I never love to use that term, but if we're thinking about it in U.S. tennis terms. So I think that in how that relates to Frances is, yeah, he is, like I said, he's not a top 15 player right now, but people I think are willing to let him experience those ups and downs, because if you find someone with a quality like he has, that's something to be treasured as well. So I think it's a very exciting time if you're a fan of his. And I think you have to be encouraged by what you may see in 22, especially with him ending the year so well right now.
Absolutely. And just one final note on the article. I wanted to bring up the Kyrgios comparisons because it was something that I think has to be brought up because of the exciting style, the fact that they are friends and they've gotten along and played doubles together so well. But you point out an important distinction is that you kind of know what Frances is going to give you effort-wise every single match. And it's somebody that I think in that way can be more exciting. The phrase that gets overused a lot is what tennis needs. And I think you even brought that up in your piece. But the fact that Tiafoe plays the way he does, has that crowd support, has kids as a youth on his side as well, but that also he's got that reliability factor. You might not have your A game every week, but the effort, it's never really been in question with Frances.
Yeah, the Kyrgios part was, like I said, there was 3 players he played doubles with, and Nick was the third. And I just got thinking about it a little bit, and Nick and Frances are really good friends. I mean, like I said, they played together. There's a lot of social media back and forth that they love. And, the way I thought about it in the end was that, we continuously wait and wait for Kyrgios to deliver on something that most likely we're never going to get, this sky high expectation of a player who is as charismatic and as talented and as unique as him, but is also this completely focused player when he's on the court that's going to win 16 Grand Slams. It's just that ship, I think, sailed a long time ago. But I think what people enjoy about Kyrgios is a lot of that Frances himself brings to the court. And I honestly think Nick would be one of the first people to admit that. I'm not sure I put Nick in the best light in the end of that piece, but I thought in the way it's more just commending Frances for, the best quote that he had in this story, and this was during the US Open, was that, what really matters is him playing in front of kids that their parents spent their money out to go bring him out, and win or lose, the most important thing was how he conducted himself and how he performed in front of them. And, that's what I mean in the end, is that you're never going to get something that you're not expecting with Frances, and quite honestly, you may get more, and we'll see where he goes from here.
Ed McGrogan here on Tennis Channel Inside In. I think it's a very fair and articulates why Tiafoe is so exciting. And getting to today's action, he beats Tsitsipas for the second time this year. Beat him at Wimbledon in the first round. Beats him in 3 sets, drops the first today, and comes back and wins. What strikes me about Tiafoe, especially on indoor hard courts when you can really hear the ball pop and really break down exactly when these two players are playing. But Frances has a very tactical approach to the game. watching that Murray match and watching him play and watching him play the Tsitsipas match, that it was a completely different strategy. He's got that aggressive style of coming to the net. He took his lumps when Tsitsipas passed him. And honestly, he took a first set where Tsitsipas was serving untouchable levels. Frances digs deep from a breakdown the third and wins this one 6-4. Just a tremendous effort. Again, proving your theory right that he can beat anybody in any given day.
Yeah, you almost buried the lead there. He was down 3-0 in the third and then ends up winning 6 of the final 7 games. I mean, at that point, I'm just about, it's very hard to see someone coming back against Stefanos as well as he was playing at points in this match. I mean, Tsitsipas, when he's on, is really pretty much, he is fantastic to watch as well. But Tiafoe, what he did so well is, he's really unwavering in his approach. If he gets past, that's okay. He knows the strategy that works for him. And I think a lot of pro players that do succeed, they understand that they've gotten to the points where they've gotten to because they rely on a time-honored and practiced a million times over strategy that, if they play it perfectly, it's going to be hard to beat them. So, Tiafoe did that today. I mean, you could say he benefited from some Tsitsipas stuff in the third set. There's 2 service games, in fact, where Tsitsipas gives double faults and loses the game. But I would also contend that might be a result of Tsitsipas, having to deal with these aggressive returns, and that just adds nerves onto his end. So you have to commend Frances for that as well. So he's applying pressure kind of constantly in various ways, mentally, physically. His forehand is just incredible to hear indoors, like you said. I mean, it's like a pop gun when that goes off. And there are some things that he'll work on. I mean, I don't think his backhand is where that is the liability that he's going to have. And I think Stefanos exposed that for a little bit today, but over time, I mean, the guy is so fit. He plays great. You've seen it at the Grand Slams. I mean, he does well in best of 5 because the guy, he's a statue that hits a tennis ball. And not that Tsitsipas can't keep up with that, but he was just too much today. And, that's one of his best wins of the year, bar none.
Absolutely. Especially knowing that Tsitsipas had already seen him get beat by him and was going to dig deep, but it was Frances serving well, getting to the net, just phenomenal stuff. Vienna's been an interesting tournament, and I think we can look at it. Another guy we've been talking about for the last couple months, his road to recovery, how he's been playing better, steadily moving up the rankings. Andy Murray, he beats Hurkacz before falling to Alcaraz. Hurkacz was his first top 10 win since the Cincinnati via New York tournament in 2020 when he beats Zverev.
Wow, good coin. Yeah.
But Murray is somebody that this process has been so long and drawn out that you can't just, in my opinion, you just have to appreciate the work, the effort, and what's going into this recovery from a guy that, bears repeating, has one real hip in his body.
Yeah, I think Murray has been this winner of, amidst this year ending where Federer, Nadal, Djokovic are going to end the year with 20 slams apiece. And you're like, what room is there for Murray in this discussion? Yeah. And somehow he has managed to, come off, I think, even more impressively in this, either 2.0 or 3.0 stage of his career where, I'm not sure if you're going to see this stage of, I know you're not going to with Roger. I think he's, his schedule has been cut so significantly, but, can you imagine, I guess in the real twilight of their careers, I mean, Rafa, Djokovic, are they going to kind of dig to, Murray was playing a challenger a couple, not that long ago. He was doing that in the second week of one of the majors where he was ousted early and opted to play that. The guy loves tennis and they all do, but Murray is going to end up being someone who we think of, as part of that great group of champions because of what he's accomplished and what he accomplished amongst them. But he's also going to have some of these parallels to like Andre Agassi, where he loves playing the game. Not that Andre always loved playing. That's kind of the point of his book, but that's either here nor there. But Murray he's just not letting go. I think that man wants to wring every single thing out of what he's got. And honestly, I think you have to kind of be a bit encouraged, when you look ahead to 22, like, sure, Murray can do some damage. I mean, and I mean, he's got more experience than pretty much anyone out there at this point. So kudos to him. Absolutely.
Still so clutch in these big moments. You saw it in the Hurkacz match, obviously in the Frances match from last week, and losing to a guy in Alcaraz who he had beaten at Indian Wells. The 18-year-old kid is already quickly ascending, maybe quicker than we thought, but he's shown tremendous growth as Alcaraz had in just the last couple of months. His performance over Tsitsipas, beating him at the U.S. Open, but this is a guy with a very lethal forehand and a lot of easy power on his game. He's one that, we really have to monitor for him throwing his hat in the race for being one of the top players in the game very, very soon.
Yeah, this is turned into the Tsitsipas punching bag show, I guess, with all this. But Alcaraz, look, some people were on him earlier than I was. Credit to them for seeing this. Some colleagues of mine, and the U.S. Open was certainly the coming out party for him. He had a really early clay court title before that, but when you can't forget about the matches that he put together in New York. I mean, ultimately he was actually only derailed by physical ailments when he retired against FAA in New York. But you see the build on him. The forehand is obviously just tremendous. And the thing, like I said, we talked about comparisons to players, and the one thing you want to avoid are those inevitable Rafa comparisons, because that's just so high of a thing to live up to. But the big thing with Alcaraz is it seems like, faster surfaces are going to be what he actually does best on. And this is, I think, a sort of a reflection of the way tennis academy training has really evolved in the past, in the years almost since Rafa, where it's more all court. And, I think Alcaraz is, in the men's side, he's got to be, the young name to watch. And I think he's the dark horse for a lot of tournaments coming up when people start looking at them in 22.
I'm glad you brought up fast surfaces, and another player that's done so well on them is JANNIK Sinner, who's also still just 20 years old. He won in Antwerp. I didn't even know this stat until our team tweeted it out, but 10-0 in his last 10 indoor hard court matchups I don't think he's dropped a set either. So it's just been a tremendous growth for him. 5 titles now before his 21st birthday. You'd have to go back to Djokovic to find someone who's done that. And it's very efficient. I don't want to say boring. That gets thrown out there a lot, but you watch his matches, you watch what he doesn't really have many weaknesses, does Sinner. And it's just a very efficient style, and he plays downhill, especially indoors.
Yeah, the Djokovic, that's a really good one. That came up after his win last week. I mean, Sinner, the stereotypical Italian player is more, flash, one-handed backhands typically. You have guys like Fanini, Massetti, guys like that in your mind. Sinner, he's born in very northern Italy. It's practically a German little enclave of the country, actually. You get that, you can tell from his name, it's more Germanic actually than Italian, but also in the way that he plays a bit too. I mean, he is kind of this throwback player. He's kind of an old soul. And I think he sort of embraces that. And I think he's going to be part of this, this wave of players that's coming through here. He's not that much older than Alcaraz as well. So, we're seeing again, players that you might typically have expected to thrive on slower surfaces, but they're winning around the world. They're winning really, and I'm curious to see, honestly, these guys win, on grass at some point too. Like we're going to get a bigger sample size of them at events like Queens, Eastbourne, Wimbledon, for example, and, how their games translate, from January all the way into it is going to be fascinating. But Sinner and the other thing with him as well is, he's been doing that since January, February this year. We're into a very late part of the season, and it really hasn't relented at all so much. So it's, part of it's his youth. I think you're willing to kind of play anything, and you've got the energy to burn. But part of it is just, how good he is. And he's shown that already.
That ski culture too, right? That former skier
Yes.
that's really just, finding a way to win and loves to compete. He's been something to see. More here with Ed McGrogan on Tennis Channel Inside In. Quick note on the women's side, there's a big tournament going on in Transylvania where there's some top players competing. But the one that we want to focus on, we've been monitoring, obviously, for the last month or so, Emma Raducanu. She's into the quarterfinals. She'll play Kostuk tomorrow as that match takes place. But it was not just her win today, which was efficient, but the first win she had in this tournament over Hercog, who won the first set, Ed, and it was not looking good in the second set. And I know you were following this match, commenting on it on Twitter, really diving into the specifics. This wasn't about, as you said, X's and O's. This was just about fighting and her having to really dig deep to find a way to turn the tide and prevent a little bit of a losing streak, which it would have been had she lost that one.
Yeah, Tracy Austin on Tennis Channel was calling that match, and I thought it was perfect for her to be the one to talk about Emma Raducanu, because she was in a very similar spot to her years ago, winning the U.S. Open at a very, very young age, and you get the expectations that come along with that. Now, the difference is that Raducanu could not have been less known, nationally speaking, before this Open. She qualified for the tournament. It was one of the more just incredible stories in sports, let alone tennis. And, 3 weeks later, my grandmother, who hardly watches the game, was talking about this 18-year-old British qualifier and the 20-year-old that she was playing from Canada across the net. So, and that hasn't subsided, by the way. I mean, the Fernandez and Raducanu have really tapped into something that the WTA is going to absolutely thrive off of, just to say. So there's a lot for those two. But in terms of Emma, yeah, I mean, the big thing is, of course, the difference is that she's the hunted now, and whether it's something of not her doing, like, this is the way.
What happens when you win? Yeah.
When you win, this happens. So to her, I mean, you want to get obviously that first win out of the way right away before this kind of builds, because it just compounds upon each other. And I'm sure she was feeling that. I mean, in dropping the first set and looking like she might go down in straights here. And if that was the case, she would have had 10 consecutive straight set wins, followed by 2 consecutive straight set losses. The big stat I loved was that this is her 6th main draw period, and she's already a U.S. Open champion. So, to her, what she, I thought, did well was, just, again, to kind of bring it back to Frances in a weird way, it's doing what you do best. I mean, she had to kind of get over a bit of a mental block to get that second set, but the third set she opened up, and you finally kind of saw those incredible backhands that she's hitting throughout during the U.S. Open. And I'm happy to see her get a win like that. I mean, you can tell that. I think you can already tell that the way 2022 could go for her is it's going to be just relentless focus on her. This is before 6 months down the road, before you get to Wimbledon, before you get back to New York. It's going to be, how she handles it is going to say a lot about herself. I'm sure she's going to handle it fine. She honestly, I thought, has kind of spoken in sort of veteran-like ways, even as she was doing so well at the Open. That was impressive. So it was a good win for her, to get to this point. We'll see how she does the rest of the week. But I think Emma, stock is still to rise on her. But I wish her the best of luck, too, because she's in for kind of a new challenge in a way.
Wimbledon next year is going to be quite a scene. You brought that up. It's going to be something when she makes her reappearance there, which is when she first came on any radar. But it just highlights too, there's so many ups and downs in a pro tennis career, let alone like someone that wins a championship. She's so young. This is going to happen. You can't win every match, but I was happy that she got the first one out of her way. In a weird way, it reminded me of Ash Barty at Miami, who had that first match, had a match point down. That was her toughest match en route to the final. So We'll see if
I
that.
mean, yeah, I mean, look, it's up and down throughout a career, a season, a single day, a set. I mean, that's why tennis is as unique as it is. No sport really asks you to, win, let's say, like 70% of your points, but if you can't win the one significant one, you can suffer the greatest penalties for letting it all slip away. So, the pressure that these players are dealing with, no matter if you're Raducanu or you're Andy Murray, it's heavy mental pressure. And anybody who plays the game, even at any level, can tell you that too. If you're in any kind of competition, it's demanding. I think that's why it's so rewarding. I think that's why we love it, to watch it, to play it. That's why players like Murray want to keep playing it. But it asks a lot, but that's the drama in it. And I'm curious to see both Emma, Frances, all these players where we go from here. They offer a lot already, and we'll see why they take it going forward.
Before I let you go, just some quick thoughts, if you had any, on the finals races that are heating up, and all spots are almost confirmed in the ATP race to Turin and WTA race to Guadalajara. This is 2 new locations. Guadalajara is a one-off based on what's going on right now with the WTA finals originally scheduled in Asia. Turin is the new location for the ATP finals in Italy. And we have 6 people officially in on the ATP side, 7 on the WTA. There's some races still going down to the wire, some commitments that we're waiting on. But any thoughts here, Ed, on their final races for the push to the end of the season?
I think however they turn out, what's going to be interesting with those events is you're missing a lot of the big traditional names in both fields. Barty also is bowing out of this. I believe Osaka's been confirmed, and we know it is for Federer, Rafa. Team has been out for a while as well. So, the big thing, there is a lot of opportunity, and truth be told, the season-ending championships have been won by ascendant players the past couple of years on the men's side. You had Tsitsipas winning it recently. You had Zverev, Medvedev. So all those 3 in particular are going to get a big crack at another, confidence booster going into 22. You have players like Rublev as well, Casper Ruud, players that have really had nice seasons that are going to get some of their first opportunities. And, on the WTA side, like if Kontaveit can qualify for it, you're going to get players that are in that environment for the first time. And, it's kind of one of the biggest moments of their career. So that's interesting in and of itself. But, also we're going to also get the return of Novak Djokovic starting next week in Paris as well, and going into the ATP finals. So, that's, again, that I think is also, equally as fascinating in other ways. We're going to end the year. When I last saw him, he was in the press room of the Open. I wasn't sure what his plan was. Was he going to, call it a year? Kind of certainly a reasonable option if he wanted to, considering everything. Guy doesn't have anything to prove, but he's back to, I would think also, to try to keep Medvedev away from number 1 year end. He's got a little work to do for that. So I think what we'll see from Djokovic is also going to be, I think he has one more big push in him as well. I'm sure he would love to, kind of erase a bit of that sting, with another season ender. He's been fantastic at this event in past years. So, that's really what I'm looking forward to, is kind of seeing what he does. And then it's seeing kind of everybody else who may be getting a pretty significant chance of their own.
Still some work to be done to round out the field, but we've got a lot of exciting weeks of tennis left, and these should be heck of tournaments here to watch. Can't wait for that. Ed McGrogan, thanks for joining Tennis Channel Inside In. I do want to ask you as a parting shot, I see the Bills hat on there, so the confidence.
I was going to do my Go Bills at the end, but thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we got a couple important games to hopefully salt away here after a tough Monday nighter in Tennessee, but I feel pretty good. Yeah. You had a bye week, 2 weeks to salt over that one. But they came back pretty well from that Hail Mary last year after a bye. They didn't lose a game to the AFC title game. So I'm hoping for similar things this year.
Well, I could see the Bills have you in a good mood. And it's, You probably are in the best mood for your sports fandom, because I have heard rumblings. Next time we do this, when it's on video, I want to see the Brian Leach shrine. I've heard rumblings of it. I know that he's
yeah, I'll
got a special
I'll have to tilt my computer this way. We can take a look at it.
Rangers are looking better too.
Right.
Yeah, it's a big New York sports renaissance for you and the teams you support. So props for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I got my yin and yangs, my upstate and downstate teams. There you go.
Ed McGrogan, you can catch his work, especially the Frances Tiafoe story, on tennis.com. Ed, thanks for joining the show.
You got it. Anytime, Mitch. Thanks.